Hello again, my name is Dr. Mark Sandoval here at Uchee Pines Institute, and it is a pleasure to be with you on this 10-day coronavirus immunity challenge. And we are continuing, we're getting to the latter part of these messages that we have. And today we are going to be looking at hydrothermal therapy and its impact upon immunity. Hydrothermal therapy and immunity. First of all, just a brief history of hydrotherapy. Hydrotherapy has been used since recorded time and has been used in all different cultures. Hydrotherapy constituted a major form of treatment in the Greek and the Roman empires, and indeed, if you travel and you visit Rome and the old Grecian locations, you will find many different baths, Greek baths and Roman baths, as you can see depicted in this picture here. And so that was a major form of treatment, a major form of preservation of health in their societies. And in fact, hydrotherapy found its place in healthcare, even in the United States, up until about the 1950s. It was prominent in hospital systems for the treatment of all sorts of conditions, including psychiatric conditions. And it began to lose favor in the 1950s because medications were developed, and it was much easier to give somebody a medication than it was to stick them in a tub for an hour and try to do all of the business associated with hydrotherapy. Well, what is hydrotherapy and how does it work? Hydrotherapy applies water to the body in order to modify the body's own functions. And so it is not used as a substitute for the body's functions. And indeed, if you have a loss of a particular function in the body, hydrotherapy is not going to make up for that loss. It simply uses what is there and helps to modify it. So hydrothermal therapy, which is the major component of what we're going to be discussing today, hydrothermal therapy is the application of water to the body at certain temperatures. So temperature becomes an important part of this. And that is to modify the body's own functions through that change in temperature. Now, how does this work? Well, this hydrothermal therapy and temperature challenges can affect every system of the body. We think of the circulatory system with dilation or constriction of blood vessels under the influence of heat and cold, respectively. We think of the nervous system and how you might feel cold and respond to cold if you come into cold contact, or ice on your skin or other things like that. Integumentary system, which is your skin, it responds as well to those challenges. Your immune system too, and we're going to be focusing on that again specifically today. Your endocrine system, so the secretion of hormones, that is responsive to it as well. Your digestive system, your respiratory system, your urinary system, your reproductive system, musculoskeletal system, and so on. Every system of the body can be affected by changes in temperature and applications of water. And as far as hydrotherapy or hydrothermal therapy is concerned, its overall effect is a combination of all of these systems working together and their modifications to bring an end result. So what kind of treatments are there? We separate those into basically two groups. You have whole body treatments or you have localized treatments. Your whole body treatments are things like a full shower, a full bath, sauna bathing, a wrap or a pack where you have everything wrapped around you except for your head and so on. And you can have localized treatments, everything that we mentioned before, but just to a specific part of the body. You can have a localized shower or spray to a particular part of the body. You can have another localized bath. The most common one that we know of is hot foot baths. You can have an irrigation or lavage. What's an irrigation? Well, an irrigation is when you have an open system or a tubing, basically, and you're running the water through that tubing. Well, tubing, I say, you have a channel that has an opening on one end and opening on the other. One of the examples of that would be using saltwater nasal irrigation. You get something called a neti pot or something similar to it. It's almost like a little teapot. Put some cup of warm water, quarter teaspoon of salt, quarter teaspoon of baking soda, mix it up in there. If you've got sinus problems or allergies, you just put that little spout in the top nostril, bend over sideways over a sink, sideways, not up like this, you choke yourself. Sideways, you put it in the upper nostril, you hold your breath and you pour. And your nasal passages end up being that tubing. It's an open channel where the water goes through and then it'll come back out the other side and run through. And you do that, and you take a breath and so on, and you turn the other side, put it in the upper nostril, hold your breath and pour, and it'll run out the other side, and you do so back and forth until it's done. That's an irrigation. And lavage is similar, but lavage is for a cavern. It's almost like doing so in a cave, where there's an opening on one side but closed on the other side, and you're basically running water in the same entrance, out of the same entrance, and so on. Fomentations, well, this woman might be using a special type of fomentation pad where you have a moist cloth that applies heat or cold to the area that it's on. Compresses, packs, poultices. Poultices use chemicals in them, herbs or other things like that are mixed in it and then applied to the body under the influence of moisture or water. So these are various different localized treatments that you can do. Now let's look specifically at hydrothermal therapy and its impact upon the immune system. And to understand some of its impact on the immune system, we have to understand a little bit about the immune system itself. And we're going to dive right into heat shock proteins. Heat shock proteins. What are they? Heat shock proteins are proteins in the cells that help to protect the cells from injury and damage with various different challenges. So what they can do is they can activate receptors of the innate immune system, the immune system that's on all the time and always working, including things like your natural killer cells and so on. It helps to protect and maintain normal cell functions. If proteins function based upon their shape, and their shape is dependent upon the order of the amino acids that get put together, and then it kind of folds up into a particular shape. Their function is dependent upon that shape, and sometimes those proteins can get misshapen, and these heat shock proteins help to reformat them and put them back in the right shape so that they function well. They also help to protect and maintain proper protein function and activity in the cells, and they even protect against mutations as well. So a lot of good functions that heat shock proteins have, and heat shock proteins, you produce more and more of them as your temperature goes higher. You see heat shock proteins. So as your temperature gets higher and higher, then the number of heat shock proteins increases, and typically the higher the better. So if you don't get much above 107 degrees, because that's going to be dangerous getting above there, but the research shows that the body temperature is up to around 107, 107.2. There continues to be increasing and increasing heat shock protein production. Now, once you get into those upper ranges, then there's other negative things that start happening to the cells as well, so you don't really want to push it too high. So here's a study where they took 12 people, and what they did is they put them in a bath at 103 degrees Fahrenheit. That is around, let's see, 39, close to 39, 100.4, yeah, close to 39 to 40 degrees Celsius. And what they showed is that once they put them in the bath, they measured their blood levels before and afterwards, and they found that just raising the temperature and into the fever range, it increased the monocytes, or activated the monocytes, so that they began to be more functional. And what are monocytes? Monocytes are white blood cells that are particularly responsible for eating up the bad guys. They do a lot of phagocytosis, or eating of the bacteria and so on. It increased the production of tumor necrosis factor alpha, which is one of the chemicals that stimulates the immune response, and it increased the response to bacterial challenges. So individuals were able to respond better to bacterial challenges to their system and have less problems with infections. It's not just heat. Cold also has its effect as well. This one study took 7 people and put them in a 41-degree chamber, 41 degrees Fahrenheit, not Celsius, 41 Fahrenheit, which is actually quite cold. It's around, 5 to 10 degrees Celsius, around 5 to 7, I guess. He was pre-treated with heat and or exercise. So the individuals that did this, they either exercised a lot to increase their body temperature, or they were in some kind of sauna to warm them up, and then they went into this cold chamber and they were exposed to the cold for a period of time. And what they found is after this happened, it increased the number of leukocytes or white blood cells in their bloodstream. It increased particularly the granulocytes, which are a particular type of white blood cells that become involved in things like bacterial infections. It increased your natural killer cells and their activity. And again, these are guys that are always active, always looking for trouble, always in that process. And it increased interleukin-6, which is one of your prominent inflammatory molecules to help with the immune system. This study, you had 9 athletes and 9 non-athletes. This was a Finnish study in Finland. And what they did is they took a 15-minute sauna at 205 degrees Fahrenheit. That's around 95, 98 degrees Celsius. And it was followed by 2 minutes of cooling down at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. What they showed is, again, there was an increase in the total white blood cells, and particularly your lymphocytes, your neutrophils, and your basophils. Lymphocytes, primarily viral infections; neutrophils, primarily bacterial infections; basophils, they're involved in allergic responses and so on. So athletes did better than non-athletes. In other words, so if you were physically fit before you did this, your increase in those white blood cells was going to be more than if you were not physically fit. So we see exercise and hydrotherapy working together. Now, that was just showing, those aspects. Now, what about hydrothermal therapy and fever and its relationship to viruses? Well, in this particular study, they were looking at rhinoviruses, which are the common cause for, or the major cause for common colds. And what they did is they took a 20-minute hot bath at 113 degrees Fahrenheit. So the body temperature increases. So it's 113 degree temperature water. It's a bit hot, and you stay in it for 20 minutes, and then you get out. And what it showed is that it was able to decrease the replication or the reproduction of rhinovirus by 90%, almost turn it off. And that antiviral effect was shown to be through, again, heat shock proteins, this time heat shock protein 70. Had that effect of suppressing viral replication. In this study, there were short hyperthermic treatments, again about 20 minutes, similar, different study, that have been shown to replace or suppress, the replication of things like togaviruses, which are responsible for German measles and equine encephalitis, paramyxoviruses, which are responsible for measles and mumps, respiratory syncytial virus, parainfluenza, and so on, rhabdoviruses, which are responsible for encephalitis, rhinoviruses, which are responsible for colds, and even retroviruses, which are involved in HIV and other similar conditions. So all of these have been shown to be suppressed, those viruses, by exposure to fever-type temperatures. Now here's another study, and it looked at 3,018 subjects, and the question is, do these findings actually result in improvements in humans when it comes to immune function and sickness? Well, this was 3,018 subjects, and basically what they did is they took half of the group and they instructed them that when they take their showers, their normal showers on a regular basis, end the shower with cold. In the shower with cold. Most people take hot showers because they have access to hot water. And so at least 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, and so on at the end of that. And what they showed is that over a period of the next 6 months, there was a 29% reduction in days lost to sickness for the individuals that simply ended their shower with cold, compared to those that did not end their shower with cold. So that little change, just ending your shower with cold, decreased days lost to sickness by almost 30% in this group of individuals. Here's another study, and there were 25 subjects that were doing sauna bathing on a fairly regular basis, and 25 individuals that were not doing any sauna bathing. And what they did is they followed them again for 6 months to see how many of them became sick. And what they showed is that the sauna group had significantly fewer colds than the controls, than those who were not getting sauna bathing. In fact, it cut the rate about half. So that it shows that these things do have an impact upon whether one gets sick. It definitely has an impact upon your rate of infections. Now, we're in this whole COVID challenge. What does that have to do with COVID? Well, it probably has some significant correlations with it. Wouldn't be a bad idea for us to end our showers with cold, maybe even switch to hot and cold, doing contrast showers, and having heat every once in a while, get in a nice hot bath and work up a sweat. That actually does very good for us. One of the concerns about COVID is dying from pneumonia. Well, the studies show that if you take sauna baths on a regular basis, it decreases your risk for developing pneumonia. This was 2,210 men that were followed for over 25 years. This is a big study. And what they showed is that compared to those who had less than one sauna bath a week, this is a Finnish study, and less than 1% of the population of Finland does not take a sauna bath at least once a week. Like, they all take sauna baths. And so compared to them, 2 to 3 sauna baths a week, you reduce your risk of pneumonia by about 33%. And if you have 4 or more sauna baths a week, that decreases your risk by almost half. Huge reductions in risk of developing pneumonia simply by doing sauna bathing on a regular basis. Now, what about cancer? Cancer is related to our immune system as well. Well, we find that tumor cells that are exposed to hyperthermia, fever-type temperatures, what happens is those heat shock proteins that we talk about, they present on the tumor cell surface. And so basically, they're like little red flags poking up on the surface of the cancer, telling the rest of the immune system, there's a problem here, come take care of it and kill it, so that the cytotoxic T lymphocytes can go there and kill those tumors. We also know from the hyperthermia research that hyperthermia increases the number of cytotoxic T lymphocytes inside solid tumors. It increases natural killer cells and their activity around the tumors as well. It decreases angiogenesis, or that blood flow to the tumors, cutting off blood flow, and it increases tumor cell apoptosis, or cell death. So this is a good thing, and it's something that can be used. Now, the last thing that we're going to look at from the immune system standpoint is autoimmune disease. So here's a study of mice, and what they did is they gave them a bath once a week for the first 32 weeks of their lives. And so the first group of mice, when they gave them a bath, they put them in hot water to induce a fever. And the second group, they did not. No fever, no hot water. The first group that had the hot water, their natural killer cell activity increased. They had fewer lymphocytes in their pancreas, and they had delayed onset of type 1 diabetes. Now, if you remember, type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease where you have an immune attack on the pancreas, and the mice that were used in the study were mice that are genetically engineered to develop that autoimmunity and to develop type 1 diabetes. And so by doing a hot bath, fever therapy, once a week, they were able to delay the onset of type 1 diabetes. In other words, it was helping to continue the normal production or the normal activity of the immune system and going against that autoimmunity. This study was looking at rats, and they treated them in such a way to develop autoimmune myocarditis, or an autoimmune attack on the heart. And one group was given heat treatments, fever, 24 hours before they gave them the stuff that was going to cause the autoimmune myocarditis. The second group, they were given the heat treatment 2 weeks afterwards, and the third group was given no heat treatments at all. And what they found is that first group that was given heat treatments 24 hours before they were given the thing that caused the myocarditis, they had significantly less scores or smaller scores on the myocarditis scale. The group 2 had less, but it was not statistically significant. And so we see that heat can even impact the immune system and autoimmunity from that standpoint. But what about people? Well, there's not a lot of studies out there with people and autoimmune conditions and fever therapy or hydrotherapy, but there is some studies on ankylosing spondylitis, which is an autoimmune inflammatory condition of the spine. And what they show is that fever therapy is able to reduce the pain, and it was able in some studies to stop the progression of the disease. So we see that there's a significant benefit associated with hydrotherapy and fever production. So at Uchee Pines, we've been using hydrothermal therapy, since the mid-1970s. That was before there was much research on the topic. So why were we using it even back then? Well, we were told that water treatments, wisely and skillfully given, may be the means of saving many lives. Let diligent study be united with careful treatments. Let prayers of faith be offered by the bedside of the sick. Let the sick be encouraged to claim the promises of God for themselves. And we were also told, but many have never learned by experience the beneficial effects of the proper use of water, and they are afraid of it. Water treatments are not appreciated as they should be, and to apply them skillfully requires work that many are not willing to perform. But none should feel excused for ignorance or indifference on this subject. There are many ways in which water can be applied to relieve pain and check disease. All should become intelligent in its use in simple home treatments. Mothers especially should know how to care for their families in both health and sickness. So with this coronavirus thing, what are some things that you can do? Well, just look at what the research says. Take a shower and end with cold. Maybe it would be even better to do a shower where you go hot for a while and then cold, and then hot for a while and then cold, and then hot for a while and then cold. It's called a contrast shower. It's been shown to help with the immune system, something that could be helpful in this case. If you start feeling sick, you're just starting to get the very first parts of an infection, or that achy feeling, sore throat, other things like that, go and get into the bathtub and put the water on hot and work up a temperature. Get into the fever range. Make sure somebody is there with you so they can monitor and make sure that you're okay. Get some ice water to put it on your head, or a water bottle with ice in it and whatever, so that you can keep your head nice and cool and you can tolerate it. And from the studies, at least 20 minutes of getting your temperature up, that's going to have a significant impact upon your immune system. Then end with cold, like the shower. Get off in bed and rest for a little while. Another thing that you can do is a hot foot bath. Just sit on the edge of the tub, fill it up with hot water, put your feet in that hot water, and wrap up with a blanket and sit there for about 20-30 minutes or so. Now, if you've got diabetes or really poor circulation or blood clots in your legs or open wounds, then don't do that, right? Work with your healthcare provider and move on from there. There are other treatments that can be used and things that you can look at or look for. I would recommend Uchee Pines. We have our COVID-19 page. If you go to ucheepines.org/COVID-19, COVID-19, or just on the main page and hit on the COVID-19 tab, then we've got recommendations there for things that you can do. And at the very bottom, there are some documents on how do you do a number of these treatments. Again, it's been a pleasure to be with you. My name is Dr. Mark Sandoval here at Uchee Pines Institute. There are some resources that you can check out on our website. Also, don't forget abundanthealth.net. or .info, abundanthealth.info, who is helping to coordinate all of this. And check out the resources, and may God bless you as you use water wisely for proper immune function.